Hello, how's it going, summoners? My name is Saskio and I'll be your host for our sleeper OP builds for patch 11.12. This video will cover some builds that are, while powerful, are ironically unpopular. This series sheds some light onto setups that are slept on and in many cases, situational. Make sure to hit that sub button and also join our Discord because we're doing an RP giveaway. That aside, let's get started with the video. First off, let's talk about Shen. He's an interesting champion that somehow always manages to find himself either heavily underrated or extremely broken. At the moment, he's not an underrated pick by any means and holds a rather high play rate. This time, we're going to feature a build that's a little less popular in the West. Yes, I know this isn't our Korean builds video, but I just want to throw out there that this might not be a sleeper build if you're one of those players that are always checking up on what Koreans are doing. While there's nothing wrong with the typical Sunfire cape setup, our friends in the East instead chose to build Frostfire Gauntlet on him. Ultimately, the rest of the build is nearly identical. You fit in items like Thornmail, Defensive Boots, Spirit Visage, Randuin's Omen, and Gargoyle Stoneplate somewhere in there. Other options are Titanic Hydra, Deadman's Plate, or even Force of Nature. Pretty standard stuff. Since we've already mentioned the items, I'll just go ahead and give you a quick rundown of the runes. Grasp of the Undying, Shield Bash, Second Wind, Revitalize, Cheap Shot, and Ultimate Hunter. So anyway, more about Shen. The 6th most popular top lane in high elo, he's earned the reputation he's built for himself. Not only is Shen a great top laner, he provides a ton of utility for his team. His E is an incredible ability for any tanks to have. It's linear crowd control that doubles up as an escape. Most tanks end up stuck, but Shen is blessed to have an ability that can help him out of sticky situations. This character alone proves that you don't need to play a hyper carry to win your games. Playing around utility and exercising good macro play is viable without a doubt, and if you want help learning how to impact your games as much as possible, check out ProGuides.com. We have courses and plenty of coaches who would love to help you out. Shen fits a unique protective role with his W and ultimate. Part of the reason why some players favor Frostfire Gauntlet is specifically for his strongest ability. Back in patch 11.9, Shen's ultimate received a gigantic buff, adding max HP scaling to the shield you provide an ally. There's a clear distinction in not only the effects of Frostfire Gauntlet and Sunfire Aegis, but also in their bonus stats. Gauntlet provides a maximum health for each item you complete, adding even more value to that late game shield. Every point of health matters, especially when you're giving the shield to a carry. The extra health enables them to get even deeper and go for more daring plays than they would normally be capable of. The other advantage the item has over Sunfire Aegis is the slow. It makes Shen more like Spider Shen. You just can't get away, and once he's on top of you, you're stuck. While Sunfire provides more potential damage, its counterpart is a little bit more practical, especially if you're playing against more mobile enemies. Against enemies who have a tough time escaping anyway, you'd likely to get more value out of Sunfire instead. As if you haven't seen enough of her, Gwen jungle is also a pretty underrated pick. She essentially builds the same way as her top lane counterpart. While she's not super popular as a jungler, she's managed to fight and push past the 50% win rate mark. There's definitely signs of life with this pick, and honestly, the biggest strength is that she's AP. Having an AP jungler is great, except when you have an AP top, mid, and even a bot laner. Aside from those unfortunate lobbies where you stack 3 or 4 AP carries together, the option to splash magic damage into the jungle role is invaluable. AD mid laners are powerful right now, and having that option to save an otherwise doomed 5 AD draft is also convenient. While Gwen doesn't bring much crowd control to the table, she's still rather mobile and her ganks are acceptable after level 6. Gwen can dish out a surprising amount of damage during any team fight. One of her greatest strengths is her W, because it forces ranged champions to either commit and get up close, or remain safe but unable to hurt her. As a result, Gwen is able to take isolated close fights and take advantage of her high melee damage. She can quickly stack up effects like Conquer and Riftmaker and look for opportunities to dive the enemy backline. Her incredible mobility makes her tough to escape once she's managed to reach her primary target, especially considering the short cooldown on her E when she manages to hit an enemy and remove 50% of its cooldown. For her build, run Conquer, Triumph, Legend Tenacity, Last Stand, Sudden Impact, and Ravenous Hunter. Start with an Ember Knife and build Ionian Boots of Lucidity, Nashor's Tooth, Riftmaker, Zonya's Hourglass, Cosmic Drive, and Rabadon's Deathcap. Gwen is a fighter at the end of the day, and Ember Knife is perfect for some extra combat power. She's already quite powerful in 1v1s, and the extra damage and damage reduction makes nearly any fight a winnable one, even if a little bit behind. One champion that's been rather underrated is Ryze. This time, it's pretty understandable though, because he was pretty bad for nearly the entire season. It was only recently that Ryze received enough buffs to finally find his footing and actually put up a solid fight. He essentially rose from the dead last patch, as he saw a 4% increase in his win rate. While it's still below 50%, he's held rather low win rates even when he was considered OP. Playing him can be rather tricky, especially when it comes to using his ultimate correctly. Nonetheless, dedicated players who understand how to play through various matchups can consistently carry their games by other dominating lanes, or slowly scaling up to become a monster late game threat. One build that's being used more is a much more aggressive approach than we're used to seeing. While we do expect Ryze to deal a sizable amount of damage, it's usually from him spamming Q and E over and over again. However, this build focuses on burst damage and applies a lot more kill pressure during the laning phase. Before we talk about it, let me tell you what the build is. For runes, you run Electrocute, Taste of Blood, Eyeball Collection, Ravenous Hunter. Then you go Transcendence and Mana Flow Band. The items are a tier start, followed by Sorc Shoes, Luden's Tempest, Archangel's Staff, Zhonya's Hourglass, Rabadon's Deathcap, and Void Staff. It's pretty clear from its appearance that this build focuses on a ton of burst damage. This build front-loads Ryze's burst damage, providing him with the burst damage that most players wouldn't expect to run into. While Everfrost is a popular mythic item because of its great utility, Luden's Tempest is the glass cannon approach that comes with both high risk and high reward. Although you lose the active slow, don't forget that Luden's provides a burst of movement speed when you activate the effect. Obviously, slowing down an enemy helps out your entire team, but at the very least, you still end up with the movement speed advantage with the stealth buff this item provides. Ryze is also known as a sort of machine gun mage who continuously casts spells until he's either dead, affected by crowd control, or unfortunately out of mana. Luden's Tempest cooldown decreases anytime you deal ability damage to an enemy champion. Given his short cooldowns, Ryze has no problem activating this effect several times during a longer teamfight. Even if he activates it only once, it still adds a bunch of extra burst damage when paired with Electrocute. Let me quickly ask you guys our question of the day. What's something silly you did when first starting League? I love damage, and I'm sure most of us do too. I actually picked Taric as one of my first champions. Didn't know he was a support though, and I built some BF swords on him. You can guess how that went down. I'm curious what silly stuff you guys did. Put those answers in the comments below and let's move on to the next build. Next, we'll talk about Sett. He's been a pretty hyped up character for the past several patches. However, we're not talking about top lane Sett or even mid lane Sett. Instead, we're mentioning bottom lane Sett. It's a weird pick for sure, and while I can't say that it's objectively better than solo lane Sett, it's still pretty good. Not that surprising to be honest, since Sett himself is very strong right now. Nonetheless, he sees very little play bottom when he definitely deserves some more love. By the way, I want to mention that Sett bottom duos with Senna as his lane partner. Tahm Kench Senna became popular because it allowed Senna to not only be played as a support, but it also allowed a different support champion to actually pick up farm. Most of the time it feels like supports are bounced around their low income. Thus, when they manage to actually pick up a sizable amount of gold, they can sometimes end up a bit too strong. We've even seen tanks played bottom at the professional level, utilizing the fasting Senna strategy. While support Sett is no longer the monster it once was, bottom lane Sett has no problem in regards to winning the games. You just farm up and go for a normal build. The only real downside is that you end up with less EXP. Nevertheless, this still opens up your team composition quite a bit. AP top laners, range top laners, or any other off-meta pick can make their way to the top when you pick Sett bottom. He still acts as a sort of frontline for your team, and of course, he still dishes out a solid amount of damage. You also end up with a pretty killer bottom lane when you play this duo. Sett and Senna can chain their crowd control for a lethal combo, and Sett is a great damage soak with his W. It's a tough situation for the enemy bot lane because you don't want to focus the tank, but when the tank does more damage than the carry, things get confusing real fast. That said, I'll quickly run you through the builds you can use for both champions. For Sett, run Conquer, Triumph, Legend Tenacity, Last Stand, Second Wind, and Unflinching. Second Wind is crucial since you're going to almost always play against a ranged opponent. That extra sustain will help you push through and supplement Senna's healing. For items, build a Doran Shield to start and end on Plated Steel Caps. Then go Stride Breaker, Sterix Gauge, Titanic Hydra, Guardian Angel, and Blade of the Rune King. For Senna, run Grasp of the Undying, Font of Life, Bone Plating, Revitalize, Presence of Mind, and Alacrity. For her items, build Spectral Sickle as your starting item, followed by Divine Sunder, Boots of Swiftness, Black Cleaver, Gunsu's Rageblade, and Rapid Fire Cannon. There are some suitable replacements you can fit in like Serpent's Fang or Mortal Reminder based on what you need. Our final build is Veigar's support. He's always been heavily underrated and a lot of players assume it's pretty troll. Well, it's not. Just think about how obnoxious his cage is. Even if he's not the one farming, Veigar still has plenty of opportunities to farm ability power. Whether it's last hitting with some Relic Shield stacks or poking enemies with Q, he still scales up. One could argue that he scales up equally as fast as mid lane Veigar as he's less distracted by minions and completely focused on poking the enemy bot lane instead. What distinguishes support Veigar from the typical I didn't get mid and just want to play an AP carry is the build. For runes, you typically run Guardian, Font of Life, Bone Plating, Overgrowth, Mana Flow Ban, and Transcendence. Guardian has an AP ratio, pretty convenient isn't it? Not many champions get to take advantage of it, but given Veigar's infinite scaling, you could end up with a pretty sizable shield by the late game. Then there's the item. You build Relic Shield as your starter. This lets you farm some minions once in a while to pick a free passive stack. Afterwards, build a Locket of the Iron Solari, Ionian Boots, and a Dead Man's Plate as your core. The bonus movement speed allows you to safely run around and get into a good spot to cast your E. As long as you're faster than your opponents, you can force them into suffocating situations where they'll have to either burn important abilities to escape your cage, or sit in it and pray that they can survive. After those items, you build typical Veigar items. Zhonya's Hourglass, Rabadon's Death Cap, and a Void Staff, or even Cosmic Drive are great options. Yes, even as a support, you're entitled to build some AP. However, that comes later into the game and you don't always get there. Even with just the core items, you provide incredible pick making potential and an acceptable amount of damage considering the fact that you're playing Veigar as a support. That'll conclude our sleeper OP picks and builds. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Like I mentioned earlier, don't forget about that giveaway either. All you have to do is join our Discord and subscribe and you can win some free RP. I hope to see you guys in our next video, and until then, best of luck on Summoner's Rift.